Hey guys, how's it going? Cran here. So in the last week, I've played quite a bit of Path of Exile, and I know most of my videos on my channel these days are Hearthstone. Some people have never seen this game before, and if you're curious, it may be better if you check out some of the introductory Path of Exile videos that I'll link at the end of this video. Now, if you have, or if you just want to see what it's about, or if maybe you're a PoE fan already, I'm going to talk about what I thought of the playthrough that I had through the new expansion content. So this is the main reason why I played this time around. Path of Exile is a game I played through and through, a few years ago, and it was a game that I really was one of the best at. And yeah, these days I go back just to see what's going on, and when big updates happen, I like to make a cool new character and explore the content. So in the background here, I'll have for you guys some footage of my character clearing maps, and at the end of just talking about a few general things, I'll go over the character so you guys can see how the things are working and why it was quite a bit of fun. So I played because the pretty big expansion was released. The expansion introduced Act 4, so the game is pretty complete now, and it also introduced a very big change and introduced something called lockstep. So in the past, the game would be very prone to characters being out of sync with the server, which would result in you dying in a very unfair way. So what happens these days if you lag a little bit is, well, you just lag in the game. And this is arguably a lot better because you always know when you're lagging and when you're not lagging. You always know the actual position of your character, and it makes the game far more enjoyable to play as a whole, and when you die you feel far less cheated, which is really important for a game like Path of Exile when it's brutally hard, when you really are trying to improve your ability to play the game every single time you play it, and you want to actively be able to do that rather than lose because of circumstance. So yeah, the lockstep change is really big, and I do encourage anyone that plays to play with it on, unless your connection is really bad, in which case you probably might just want to do something else instead. So out of the Act 4 content, Act 4 is really insane. Every time they really introduce a new act, they really bump the difficulty of the game up a lot. It happened in Act 3, it happened in Act 3 Part 2, and it happened again in Act 4. There's so many mechanics, and the monsters just scale up so much that the game is really difficult to stay alive in. And in this playthrough, I wanted to play with my girl Rania, and she's never played the game before, and of course because of that we played on softcore. But because I played on softcore, I made a character that you guys can easily tell is extremely reckless, and yes, this is not a hardcore build. It's basically what you do for softcore. You make a crit character and you blow stuff up. This type of character, because the content is so much harder these days, is kind of getting extinct. Even on softcore, most players are playing very defensive characters because they need to. If you don't, you'll just die randomly, and it, feels kind of bad, man. So in Act 4, they introduced a lot of bosses, introduced a lot of monsters. Some of these monsters are just absolutely absurd. When you're doing a map and you encounter some of the Act 4 monsters, you will instantly see just how absolutely ridiculous they are. The bosses in Act 4 that they introduced are also really hard. They're quite a difficulty jump from the previous content, and in the end, the final boss, Malachi, this guy needed to get nerfed, after just a few days of the expansion being launched, because it was basically, impossible for new players to kill him, and it lagged, and it was, just totally insane damage. When the expansion was first launched, there was a race. The first person to kill Malachi on hardcore and softcore got Alienware laptops. And, well, people tried, and the first person to make it to hardcore Malachi died to the first attack of the boss. He pulled the boss hit him, he died. And he was basically a melee tank. They really tried to improve the melee thing in this expansion, but I can't say it really worked. Melee is fine, but it's not really much better than in the past. It's really that casters were made a lot worse, and I'll go into that in a second. But anyway, Malachi was brutally hard, and after you beat him, you just go to the next difficulty, and literally the entire next difficulty until you get to Act 4 is a complete joke every single time through. So the difficulty settings were pretty off. I know they really tried to make it very difficult, but the progression in difficulty didn't seem very fluid from my experience, though they did mention that the content after Malachi, they just didn't have enough time to produce it, so there will be some content after Malachi to smoothen the transition lore-wise and perhaps, hopefully, difficulty-wise as well. They also introduced some cool mechanics. They introduced things called divination cards, which are like specific pieces of loot. So, for instance, one of them is for the Tabula Rasa armor, which is a 6-linked armor, and it's called, this particular divination card is called Humility, and for this particular reward you need 9 divination cards of Humility, and if you get 9 divination cards of Humility, you can get your Tabula Rasa. And to do that, you have to farm specific zones for specific divination cards, and when you do, you basically get some pretty cool rewards. And this system is built so you can actively try to farm items that are otherwise, extremely RNG based, so you don't have to use the trade system if you don't really want. It kind of helps that a little bit, but in my experience, a lot of these divination cards are so insanely rare, at least for some items, that you basically have to trade for the cards now anyway. They also introduced jewels. Jewels are part of the skill tree and can benefit characters greatly. Some builds, I think most really strong builds these days, use a considerable amount of jewel sockets in their skill tree, but because Rania and I played self-found, we really didn't find a single good jewel for either of us, so that kind of sucked. The 2 new leagues they introduced, they had the Tempest League, which there's like super hard formations on certain zones at any given time. That didn't really seem that exciting. And then the softcore one was Warbands, which is the one that we played, which there's just like it's like a pack of exiles in some of the zones. You kill them, you get some extra loot. It seemed a bit underwhelming, and they have these leagues every 3 to 4 months, so maybe the next one will be a bit more exciting. Rania made a Ice Crash character. I played Ice Crash, as you guys know from the prior PoE video that I made, and Ice Crash is a really, really fun skill to play. They introduced a lot of other fun skills, and they modified some of the previous fun skills, and I made her go crit because I wanted to play a crit build because, why not? It's softcore, so she went Staff Ice Crash crit build, and I went a little bit more of a support Shock Nova crit build, and here I'll show you guys my character here in a second. But some of the issues that we kind of faced are, damage overall is just way, way higher, so we died a lot throughout our playthroughs. The game overall is just getting a lot harder. I wasn't able to play like an ES energy shield based character because CI is basically terrible these days. Monsters just do too much damage for you to really do well against them. They nerfed Leech like crazy. Single target Leech is really bad, and it's especially bad for spells. For melee AoE it still kind of works, but it's still pretty bad. And a big deal is that only map bosses can drop +2 maps, so the mapping system is a lot harder. Also, I believe the cartographer strong boxes can't show up on maps above level 70, I believe. We didn't find a single one throughout our entire playthrough, so it didn't really make any difference for us, I suppose. But just acquiring maps is pretty difficult, and really the best way to farm maps these days is just to do them unidentified. So having some rarity on your gear, so when maps drop, they drop blue or rare already, and having a character that can do just about anything is also a really, really big deal, because then you can just do these maps unidentified. It saves a lot on currency, and you get a huge quantity bonus for doing so. Enough of that, my character. Here we go. This is a level 83 character, Cryptnovas. I've died way too many times to really mention. And yes, I have a 6-link, and my gear is a little bit weird, and you've seen me play it through. The character is overall really, really, really strong in terms of damage, but has a few weaknesses in terms of survivability. This is the skill tree that I have. I'll post this in the description for you guys if you want to see. I started out Templar because, well, I just wanted to play Templar because, well, I always play Templar. My character has 7 power charges, if you guys noticed. I basically just have all the crit nodes, more crit, spell damage, AoE, crit, 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 some life nodes, the one that are convenient to get around. And yeah, that's really it. There is nothing too special about this build. Very standard. I don't have a single jewel socket because all the jewels that I found were completely awful, even though I chaosed one like, 8 times. Still nothing. Yeah, seems like you have to trade for that. My gear is heavily based on crit. A lot of these are just regaled golden Chris's. I'm using Shock Nova primarily with Spell Echo and Faster Casting. Shock Nova was a skill that was changed a great deal in the last patch. Shock Nova used to be just a skill that hit a ring, and on the inside of the ring and the outside of the ring you wouldn't hit anything. But Shock Nova has been changed, so it has kind of like the actual AoE effect. It hits everything on the screen, and in addition to that, it has the rings. That's why I think it says somewhere, yeah, the ring deals 50% less damage. So the damage that you do is just the damage on the tooltip, which for me right now is 12,000. But with power charges up, it's over 20,000. And with onslaught up from my armor, which you guys will see in a second, it's like about 23,000. And that's pretty good because it's only linked with faster casting and spell echo. So it's not really linked with anything damage. It's just a 3-link, no big deal. But yeah, you get plus 50% if you hit them with the ring as well. So it's kind of like, 35,000 or so, which is good in this game. This character is pretty good, but there's some skills, there's some builds that are just way stronger. It's just that, we just kind of wanted some builds that were fun. I really wanted a build that would let me experience a lot of the skills that either I haven't ever used or I haven't used in a long time. So I'm using Shock Nova there. I'm using the +2 Lightning Gem on this dagger, and that helps a lot with the damage. It makes it so this is probably better than any 4-link, and really I didn't expect to get more than a 4-link on this character. Have a really good tanky helm. Just whatever rings to fill out for some resistances. I have a pretty good necklace that I found at like level 40. Just whatever gloves. Pretty good belt. It's really my only good Vol Orb. I don't use Purity of Elements, but I guess if there was an Elemental Weakness map, I would. I'm using the Blood Dance just because, it's kind of nice to get Frenzy Charges. This character builds Frenzy Charges, Power Charges, and Endurance Charges. I have Herald of Ice with Mana Leech. Herald of Ice with Mana Leech, I was also using Herald of Thunder with Mana Leech for a while until I went to Dual Curse, is a really cool thing because you don't have to actually use mana pots very much. And one of the new mana pots they have, the Divine Mana Flask, only uses 5 charges. With the recharge 1 charge and deal a critical strike, it's really awesome because I have a over 60% crit chance when my power charges are up with Shock Nova. So I basically can use this endlessly even on single target. That's why I don't have any mana problems at all. I could probably run probably a 5-link before I run into any mana problems. So this character does use Shock Nova, but it gets the cold damage from Herald of Ice and the cold damage from the dagger, and these two things, because I have such a high critical multiplier, allows me to actually freeze everything that I kill. That means there's no bodies. That also means the Herald of Ice triggers on everything that I kill. And that also means that I leech man on everything that I kill, because the explosion from Herald of Ice does a lot of overkill damage, and you do leech overkill damage, so that is a pretty good thing. I also tried using Rallying Cry. I thought I would need it for the mana regen, but I absolutely do not. It's basically a completely unused skill, just whatever really. And Clarity, using just a low-level Clarity to help with mana regen. I probably don't really need to use that at all. I'm using Chaos Golem. Chaos Golem is this guy making all the noise running around here. Chaos Golem is pretty cool because with absolutely nothing, he has 13,000 life. He has a link with Fortify, which allows him to reduce a lot of the incoming damage and allows it to suck a little bit less. Flame Dash is the new mobility skill. It's pretty nice. Leaves down the fire thing, can crit, and does 7,000 damage with absolutely no links whatsoever. And when it crits, it basically kills everything because of my crit potential on this character. I'm using Herald of Thunder. I never really had a character that used the Heralds before, and obviously if you have one with a lot of crit, you can get a lot of use out of them, so that's kind of why I made this character. So I have the Herald of Thunder as well when I kill a shock target, and trust me, everything that I kill is shocked, so the Herald of Thunder buff is up at all times. I'm using Curse on hit, which has no mana multiplier, and I'm using Assassin's Mark and Elemental Weakness. Assassin's Mark because I'm crit-based and it amplifies my ability to crit the monsters, and Elemental Weakness over something like Conductivity because, as you've seen, I'm not only using lightning damage, I'm using lightning damage and cold damage, and I'm playing with Rania, who's using primarily cold damage and secondary fire damage with her crit Ice Crash build. So that's kind of the idea. Also, I have a Flame Totem. The Flame Totem goes up to like 30,000 DPS because I'm crit based. Most people who go Flame Totem are not crit based, so I probably do more damage than most of them. Flame Totem is a really broken skill, and well, yeah, it helps. It's basically like a decoy totem that does a crap load of damage. The armor that I'm using is something I recently switched to. We found one of these pretty late on in our adventures throughout the game, and I thought it'd be pretty cool because this character really doesn't get hit almost at all, and when it does, it's kind of a problem. So the idea is that, you know, I'd have endurance charges. The first time I'd get hit, I'd absorb a lot of that damage with the endurance charges that I have up temporarily, and you gain onslaught for 1 second per endurance charge when hit, and you lose the endurance charge when you get hit. So when I get hit, it'll absorb some damage from that hit, and it'll give me a cast speed and movement speed boost, which will allow me to initiate combat a little bit faster. This character, as you've seen, runs into a pack of monsters, starts, Nova, 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 and if I can start Nova, Nova, Nova and have a cast speed buff, I'm essentially more offensive, I'm more reactive. So this armor actually works really well with this character, despite probably being designed for a physical-based character, as you see from the physical attack damage converted to life leech. And, well, it's a 6 linked armor. I really was going for... I wanted 6 sockets because this actually has my cast 1 damage taken setup. The idea was to have cast on damage taken with Immortal Call using like a low level one because I get so many endurance charges through the full dragon skill. I want Immortal Call to be like kind of like spammed because I'm getting so many endurance charges all the time. I can probably keep up Immortal Call a lot. So I wanted a 6 socket, a 4 link, and then a 2 link. And well, I jewelered it 10 times. I got 6 sockets. I was happy about that. And I used 3 fusings, and before I even got a 4 link, I got a 6 link. So yeah, Crip RNG for the win there, and as a result, I have a high-level Immortal Call in the normal links. And the normal links are cast on damage taken, level 13, which allows level 62 skills. I think this is a pretty good spot for doing decent damage with skills while not requiring too much damage taken. So I cast Molten Shell, and that's linked to Life Leech, as well as Ice Nova. And that's linked to Chance on Flea because I had nothing else to really link it with. I can't really use this for my primary skill because my primary skill is basically all blue links, and this is an armor evasion armor, so the chance that I'll get multiple blue sockets is basically none. This is the only setup that I could really figure out. The chance to flee is kind of cool. It's just really defensive again, but the idea is that when you take a lot of damage, you cast an Ice Nova, you have a really high chance to crit, so the Ice Nova will freeze everything. Even if it doesn't, you'll leech a lot of life, and then the Molten Shell will pop. The Molten Shell will give you additional armor, reducing the amount of damage that you take, and will proc at a later time, and that will give you Life Leech as well. So it's like, it'll Ice Nova, it'll stop the incoming damage, and you'll regain a lot of health, and then a few seconds later, when Molten Shell triggers, you'll gain health again from that one. So it's like a 2-staged Life Leech from cast on damage taken, and it's pretty defensive. Overall, I think this character is really cool. The gem setups are really awesome. I never really had a character that behaved this way, and I never really got a chance to use Shock Nova on a really powerful character before, and it's just really fun to crit stuff and move around. So overall, I had a lot of fun. This is a really fun character to play, but if you're starting Path of Exile for the first time, you're probably better off just making an Ice Crash Mace Marauder, or maybe if you're a little bit more advanced in the game, look up some builds on the forums. Overall, I've had a lot of fun. Even though it may not be the experience that some of you guys expected me to have. Normally I just, try to deck out a character, really powerful build, that kind of stuff. I had a lot of fun, and really, I'm happy I played this game this way this time. I'm going to continue playing here and there, but I don't expect too much will change with my character, and, well, if it does, I guess I'll update you guys from that. Next time you'll probably see some PoE content. It might be the next big expansion block, which I will most likely play, and I hope things overall improve over the years, as they have over the last few. Hope you guys enjoyed my review of the Awakening patch. Hope you guys maybe check out PoE and have some of the fun that I experienced, and see you guys tomorrow.